Walter Green, an elderly black man in his late 70s, stepped out of the neighborhood grocery store with a modest bag of fresh produce in hand. His weathered fingers clutched his worn leather wallet as he ambled toward his old, but well-maintained, Buick parked by the curb. Despite his age, Walter carried himself with quiet strength. His neatly pressed shirt, slacks, and polished shoes told the story of a man who believed in pride through perseverance, a man who had built a life brick by brick through hard work. Walter had lived in this neighborhood of Asheville for 38 years. He knew the names of most shop owners and local children alike. He had coached Little League in his 50s, attended town hall meetings regularly, and still volunteered once a month at the community center. People knew him, respected him, which made what was about to happen all the more shocking. As he reached for the door handle of his car, a police cruiser suddenly pulled up. Two uniformed officers emerged. Officer Brent Hawkins, a tall, burly man with an arrogant smirk, and his partner, Officer Kyle Russo, who leaned lazily against the cruiser with an indifferent expression. "Sir, we've had reports of a suspicious person in the area," Hawkins announced as he strode up to Walter, his eyes locking onto the wallet in the elderly man's hands. Walter furrowed his brow. "I just picked up some groceries. I've lived here for over 3 decades. Hawkins gave Russo a knowing glance. "Looks like he might be holding something illegal. Let's check it out." Before Walter could say a word, Hawkins grabbed the wallet from his hands and started flipping through it. "What do we have here?" he muttered. Inside was $500 in cash, money Walter had just withdrawn for home repairs he'd planned for the weekend. Carrying this much cash, who's so scoffed? A little suspicious for someone like you. Walter raised an eyebrow, his voice steady. "Someone like me? That's my money. Give it back." Hawkins chuckled as if it were a joke. "We'll need to run some checks. You might be involved in something. We're holding on to this for now." Walter's heart raced, not from fear, but from a burning sense of injustice. He had faced people like this before, bullies in uniform who abused their authority. But this time, they had made a grave mistake. Without a hint of panic, Walter pulled out his phone and calmly began dialing. "Let's see what my son has to say about this." The two officers exchanged smirks. Calling back up, Hawkins mocked. "What's he going to do?" The call connected. Walter spoke clearly. "Hey, son, I need you to come down here. 2 officers just took my money." A deep voice responded instantly. "Where are you, Dad?" Walter gave his location. "I'll be there in 5, the voice assured. Russo chuckled, still leaning on the car. "Oh, this'll be good." Minutes later, a sleek black SUV with government plates and tinted windows pulled up. The 2 officers straightened up as a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out. A federal badge gleamed on his belt. Their faces turned ghostly pale. Chief Aaron Green, their commanding officer. He marched up to them, his expression hard and controlled. "Officers Hawkins and Russo," he said icily, "would you care to explain why you just robbed my father?" Hawkins' earlier arrogance crumbled. Sir, we thought." "You thought wrong." Aaron cut in sharply. "Hand over the wallet. Now." With trembling hands, Hawkins handed the wallet back. Aaron turned to Walter. "You okay, Dad?" Walter took the wallet with a soft smile. "I'm fine, son. Glad to see justice still wears a badge." Aaron placed a firm hand on his father's shoulder and looked back at the officers. "Report to my office. You're suspended, pending an internal investigation. Trust me, you won't like what's coming next." As father and son walked back to the SUV, the 2 disgraced officers stood in place, paralyzed by the weight of their actions. Their careers were effectively over. Walter looked at his son with pride and said, "You've done well, son." Aaron smiled, the sternness fading for a moment. "You raised me right, Dad." As they drove away, the silence left behind said everything. And for Walter, justice had finally come, calmly but decisively. Later that evening, back at Aaron's home, Walter sat in a cozy living room filled with family photos, plaques, and a shelf adorned with civil rights books. Aaron brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "You know," Walter said, cradling the cup, "I remember 1964. I was 16 when I got pulled over for the first time for riding my bike in the wrong neighborhood. They searched me, humiliated me. My father told me to keep my head down. Aaron leaned forward. You never told me that. Walter nodded. Didn't want to fill your heart with bitterness. I wanted you to rise above it. But today, you gave me something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Aaron's voice softened. That's because of you. You taught me what dignity means. You taught me not to stay silent when others abuse their power. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Aaron asked, do you ever regret not leaving Asheville? Going somewhere bigger, somewhere different? Walter chuckled. Every place has its battles. At least here, I knew who I was fighting. And this community, it's home. Even if it doesn't always love me back. The next morning, Walter stopped by the community center. News had already spread. People approached him in small waves, neighbors, parents, even kids he used to coach. Mr. Green, we heard what happened. That was wrong. We're with you. A local reporter, Vanessa Liu, asked for a statement. Walter declined, but gave her a quiet nod. Let the truth speak for itself. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Chief Aaron Green began the internal investigation. Surveillance footage from the grocery store confirmed Walter's version. Community complaints about Hawkins and Russo began to surface, some new, some previously buried. Aaron sat in his office, staring at a framed photo on his desk. A young Walter holding a toddler Aaron on his shoulders. Beneath the photo was a quote in Walter's handwriting. Don't raise your voice, raise your standard. By week's end, both officers had been formally dismissed. A few weeks later, the city council invited Walter to speak at a town hall on police accountability. He hesitated, then accepted. Standing at the podium, with Aaron seated proudly in the front row, Walter began. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what's happened for generations. We're not asking for revenge. We are asking for dignity. For humanity. The hall stood in ovation. And when Walter stepped down, he shook hands with strangers, friends, and leaders alike. People who saw not just an old man with a story, but a cornerstone of a community ready to change.